Now, there are shorts and feature films for all ages, but they're all backed by scriptural themes. You'll also find resources to help you grow closer to God, along with documentaries like Culture Warrior, the story of Don Wildman and the founding of AFA. There's a lot of free content, but if you become a Great Commission partner, you'll unlock much more. Check it out today at stream.afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Thursday, August 14th, and so much news coming out of Washington, D.C. Of course, the big news is Trump and Putin are set to meet in Alaska, and what can we expect if a deal with Putin is possible? Trump said he will probably know within the first 2 minutes. I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made, he said. And so if he believes that one is attainable, Trump said the next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky, Putin, and me. I'll be there if they need, but I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders. He sounds very much like a parent there. Like, if you guys can't work out your differences, I'll come in and I'll make sure that, everything's good, and I'll moderate the situation. And meanwhile, the National Guard is cracking down on crime in Washington, D.C., and this is a very good thing because our nation's capital should actually be one of the safest places in America, not looking like a totally third world country without law and order, but that's what happens when Democrats are in control. So all of this going on, and let's welcome in Steve Deace, who is, of course, host of the Steve Deace Show on The Blaze and one of our favorite commentators here on the Jenna Ellis Show. And Steve, overall, I think Trump is winning on both of these issues.
I agree. The Ukraine thing, I will just tell you, though, I has befuddled me for 3.5 years. And we describe it on our show as some kind of reverse Wakanda. What is so unique about this place? What are they doing there? I mean, what is happening there that it is worth all of this kerfuffle? I know that Trump made like a $500 million rare mineral deal with Ukraine or something, but we've spent $180 billion, according to the DOD, on defending Ukraine's borders since this invasion began. And the entire global rare minerals market, the total market cap is $15 billion. So there's just, that's like 1,011% more we have spent defending Ukraine than if we could, mine every rare mineral, not just out of Ukraine, but also the entire planet Earth as far as we know. So let me ask you, because you're smart, and I can't tell you, I've asked senators this. I've asked really important people this. And no one can give me an answer, Jenna. Why do we care who controls the Crimean region of Ukraine? Why do we care?
That's
the
such a good question.
Just explain to all of the American, Family Association listeners all across the fruited plain why their life is any different if the World Economic Forum, George Soros, Vladimir Zelensky is a George Soros proxy. So why does it matter if George Soros and his interests if Brussels and Davos's interests are in control of Crimea or Moscow's? I mean, who's the good guy there? I'm asking.
I agree with you, Steve, that is the question, and that's the question we've been asking since the Ukraine war started, and back, when McCarthy and all of the Republicans were, wearing all of the Ukraine flags and were sending, millions and millions and millions of dollars in aid, and we're wondering what exactly is our interest there. And I don't think anyone has actually answered that question. That is,
the answer that I typically got back was, well, Putin is trying to establish another Soviet Union. He hasn't been able to subdue Ukraine in 3.5 years. And he's
good luck with that then.
I mean, come on, man. Come on.
But this is why I think Trump is winning.
Rolled that out. You'll notice they rolled that out in the immediate aftermath of Putin's invasion. But you'll notice they don't really offer any reasoning for any of this anymore, because all the reasonings, all the tropes they gave us, all fell apart. And I don't know why we're so invested in this. I don't even know why the president feels an obligation to insert himself at all. I really don't. I'm asking. Why?
But that's where I think he's winning. Let me say this. I think that's why I think he's winning on this, because that was one of his campaign promises, was saying, you know what, if I'm there, I'm going to, end this in 24 hours, which obviously didn't happen. We're, 6 months down the road. But because there has been so much U.S. investment, and I think which is a very poor decision, I didn't support that personally. I think that for him to go in and say, I was the one that negotiated the deal, we're getting this done, this is, stopping, look at what happened on Biden's watch, becomes a very good campaign issue, not just for the midterms, but then to say, let me hand over the reins in 2028. That's where I think he's going with that. Not because he should insert himself, or we need to, or America needs to care what necessarily goes on in that region. And I'll tell you, Steve, real quickly, when I was still living in D.C., when this all started, the guy who cut my hair there was actually originally from Poland and had come over, kind of recently from there. And his take on this was so fascinating, because he was like, Americans have this sense that somehow the map that, you guys grew up with in elementary school is how the world has always been. And he's like, this region has changed borders so many times, even in my lifetime. And he's like, nobody over there cares. Like, why does America think that, they need to go and preserve and protect some artificial border that nobody even in the region cares about? And so this is all nonsensical.
That's why we call it reverse Wakanda, Jenna, because there must be something that these Western elites are this obsessed with, that they have going on in this country, to justify this level of expense. There has to be, that we just don't know about. This has to be some playground for the Davos Soros crowd. And I'll just say, in terms of the deal, Vladimir Putin is not walking out, is not taking any deal that does not, at a minimum, include the provinces in the Crimea that already voted by referendum to join the Russian Federation. That is the bare minimum he's going to walk away with. And so Trump is going to have to convince his own NATO partners, and I have no idea even why NATO even still exists. We'll have that conversation maybe another day. But he'll have to convince them to convince Zelensky to give up that land for any peace deal. There's no way Putin is taking any deal that doesn't include, at a minimum, that. And so we're back again to this stalemate where if the Davos-Brussels crowd will not convince Zelensky to take that deal, and that's the minimum deal that Putin will take, well, then the only way for Putin to be so diminished that he'll just, walk away empty-handed would be for our direct involvement, which has been the plan the entire time, to milk this war for as long as possible, to eventually so that there's a point of no return, all right, to drag us into it. That was the original plan under the original Davos DC plan under Biden's auto pen and Soros and Davos in Brussels. And if Trump had not won the last election, that might have succeeded, because I think no one thought when Putin invaded this thing would go for 3.5 years. They have stretched this thing out and stagflated it long enough to maybe get to that point. But for the president to get any deal, I mean, they're going to have to agree at a bare minimum. Putin is not walking away with anything less than the Russian-leaning provinces of Crimea. So Ukraine's going to have to give up something. And we'll see if he's able to get them to convince them to give that up, because I don't see Putin leaving anything less than that.
I don't either, but this is where I think, if anything is going to happen, it will be with Trump's negotiation, because I think he actually genuinely is really good at the art of the deal. And I think you're right in terms of the history of this. And if this had been a Kamala Harris administration, we'd be seeing a very different world stage being played out here. And I think personally that all of this funding, and even going through a lot of these Republicans that voted for Ukraine funding, a lot of this is just money laundering. Frankly, I mean, it's taking our
100%,
taxes
100%.
And
in fact, that's probably what Ukraine is. Ukraine is probably the money laundering haven of the Brussels Davos World Economic Forum wing, Soros wing, which is basically what 90% of the NATO countries are these days. That's essentially what they are.
Yeah, and so
Soros in the World Economic Forum.
this is why, for everyone listening, this is why the uniparty establishment in D.C. is so absolutely corrupt, because we're not just talking about under a Democrat regime or blaming the extreme leftists. No, Republicans. Our own Speaker of the House was part and parcel to all of this, and all of the the flag wearing morons that put the Ukraine flag in their bio. I mean, some of them still have it in there.
100%.
There is no justification for America, if you're truly America first, to have that kind of vote and that kind of funding. But we've learned so much. Even with the attention on the Ukraine funding and everyone outraged on that, we've learned so much through Doge and how much reckless spending and money laundering has gone to other absolutely unnecessary and frankly just a completely evil types of projects and funding that have used our tax dollars so irresponsibly. And that's why I also think that Elon Musk was rightly frustrated at Trump for saying, well, okay, well, thanks for the info, but I'm not going to press Congress to actually do anything about it, because now the American people have transparency on this issue. We want results.
Don't disagree with any of that. I don't. And I think that, just to put a bow on this so we get to your other topic, Putin understands that Trump is in no way, shape, or form he's not expending any political capital on defending Ukraine. Putin understands this. He sees that Trump is making the NATO countries now buy arms from the U.S. in order to fund the continued Ukraine war effort. He sees that. And so his bare minimum. Putin cannot go home empty-handed. All right, he runs a thugocracy. He's the head of the 5 crime families of Russia. He cannot look weak, so he can't walk away empty-handed. Number one, because he's getting older, and there's younger thugs that want to take his spot in the Kremlin. He can't be the guy that wakes up with the horse's head in his bed this time. And so Putin knows that, and he knows that Trump has no real military resolve to directly involve the U.S. So Putin's minimum negotiating acceptance will be, give us the land that the people already voted in the Crimea to come to Russia. That's his bare minimum. So he'll need that as a trophy. Zelensky's position is, we give up nothing. All right. So Trump is going to have to figure out how to negotiate with that. And really, Trump has very little leverage with Putin if we're not going to go after him militarily. And therefore, the real leverage is on our own side with the NATO, Zelensky, World Economic Forum, Davos people. And he'll likely have to convince them, listen, we're out, you're broke, so give him the Russian-speaking lands that already voted to join his country, and we're walking away and calling it a day. And you can still have a spot on the map called Ukraine. How you like them apples? My guess is that's what he's going to try to invoke.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. So let's move to D.C. and federalizing D.C. against the, shock and horror of all of the leftists that, oh no, law and order should actually persist in the nation's capital. Is this a winning issue for Trump?
100%. And in fact, I suggested on my show yesterday that I'd give this to the end of the year for the data to confirm. The situation in D.C. cannot get any worse. So I use this until the end of the year to confirm just how much markedly better it was. And if I was President Trump, I would roll out in my State of the Union address next February. I'd roll out with, hey, we are going to offer, quote, federal help. That's what I would say. That's the term I would use. We're going to offer federal help to Charlotte, North Carolina, Detroit, Michigan, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. Mm-hmm. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay. We're going to go to all these states that have blue governors or huge blue urban crime-ridden areas. We're going to offer them federal help to help them clean up their streets for the good people there like we did here in D.C. And of course, every single one of these Democratic governors are all going to and mayors are all going to turn it down. And then you just kill them with that ad. This time next year, those ads start running. And I think those ads need to say something like this. I thought, that Leonardo DiCaprio gif where he gets up and points at the screen with a cigarette in his hand. Have you seen that gif? Okay. Hey, I know that. I've seen that. Okay. I had that reaction. It was about this time last year, the first time the Trump campaign rolled out the ad, Kamala Harris is for they, them. Trump is for you. And I was sitting in the man cave watching a football game the first time I saw that ad live, man. And I just jumped up out of my chair and said, that's the message right there. That's as powerful of a political message as I've seen either side come up with the last few cycles. And I think along those lines, when they all turn down the federal help, and I think you come back with Trump comes out with a midterm message next year that says they hated me more than they wanted to protect you, and walk them right into that trap. And here's what our side needs to do. Let's not have any deep, we don't want to nationalize. This is not, no, stop. We're not, your think tank is expired. We're in a freaking cold civil war. All right. So this isn't about literally nationalizing the police, navel gazer with the lint. Okay. Take the lint out of your navel. All right. Look up, look around and see what time it is. Walk them right into that trap, make them absolutely turn it down, and then hammer them with the message, they hate me more than they want to protect you. That's exactly what he ought to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question, though, for looking at how divided this country still is, do you think messages like that still land with the people who have previously voted for this chaos and the leftist, Marxist, communist nonsense, and they're looking at potentially ushering that into, New York City with Mandami? They're getting that in California with AB 495, which is ridiculous. Are there still rational people to convince with these
in those
messages?
cities? No. The target for those messages are you living in the surrounding suburbs of Charlotte? The target for that is a place like Brooklyn, where they have that's really been changed over in the last couple of decades. A lot of families moving in there, a lot of young Hispanic families moving in there. Okay, that's your target. The people that are moving in the surrounding suburbs and exurbs of those kinds of cities. And why do you typically move into those kinds of places? To avoid those cities, to have the social stigmas of those cities not get on you and your family and your kids. So the real target of that messaging are the voters in those places. Those cities are gone. They're lost to the spirit of the age, barring, great awakening level revival. There is no natural fix. They are, and I think you're just watching Romans 1 play out in New York City. It'll, from I didn't care that Andrew Cuomo killed my grandma to what would be the next stage of devolution from that? Well, just an open Islamist. Okay. I think you're seeing Romans 1 just play out in these cities. The restraining hand of common grace has been removed, and you'll be just given over to your own debased minds. So I think barring providential levels of awakening revival in those places, they're gone. They're lost to the spirit of the age. What you're trying to reach are the voters in those surrounding communities who don't want what's in that city getting on them, and they're not too far away from it. That's the target.
Yeah, well said. Well, we only have about 4 minutes left, but quickly, Steve, I want to get your commentary on the state of play in Florida now with Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins being announced by Governor Ron DeSantis. I think this is an excellent pick and a forecast for setting up an interesting primary run here.
I agree. And listen, I think probably a lot of your audience knows. I know the governor fairly well. But in this case, for the last several months, I have stayed away and not, tried to find out what's going on so that I can give the most objective analysis I possibly can. Because in this case, and you know this too, when you have relationships with people, if you don't say something, people take that to mean something. If you do, they do. Okay? It's almost like you can't have your own independent analysis. It must be because you know something we don't. I know nothing. I found out when the rest of America did 48 hours ago that Jay Collins was going to be the lieutenant governor of Florida. All right. So I don't know anything. I don't think I've spoken to Ron or Casey, I want to say since March or April, maybe. So it's been a minute. Okay. But just so I think that's enough distance now that I can just from afar give some unfettered analysis. And it looks to me like instead of running Casey, they're going to run him. And that's who is going to challenge Byron Donalds for that primary next year. That's the read that I would have on it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that, this is setting up kind of a legacy handoff. And I've had Senator, now Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins on this program frequently in his capacity as senator, and have gotten to know him well. And, he's a great conservative, and I think is going to give Byron Donalds kind of a real run at it because, a lot of people thought with the Trump endorsement for Byron, this would just kind of be a runaway. But I think everyone is looking to Florida to say, okay, we've had Governor DeSantis for 2 terms, and it's just been amazing win after win after win in the free state of Florida, and we need to see now who is going to carry that mantle. And so I think this is going to be a national primary and then a national election to see what is going to continue on with the great state of Florida. And of course, I have a vested interest here as a resident now, and I moved because of Governor DeSantis' policies and because Florida is so great. So I want to see his policies continue here. But yeah, really, really well said, Stephen. I think you have, as always, a perfect read on what's going on. So Steve Deace, you can follow him at Steve Deace Show on X. I'd encourage you to do that. Listen to his commentary. He's one of the best that always gives theological analysis as well. That's so important for news of the day, to make sure that we're not just talking about the politics of it, but we go to the root and to the heart of what should we be doing under a biblical worldview framework for our civil government and how that impacts the church and the family. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Hi, my name's Neil. I have some advice for you if you've been trying to break free from credit card debt. You can start by doing what I did. Get your bills together and call Trinity Debt Management. Trinity is dedicated to helping people like me become debt-free. When I called, my first experience was a feeling of relief. My counselor was kind, and best of all, she didn't judge me. In just a few minutes, she helped me figure out a plan that consolidated all my bills into one lower monthly payment. This substantially reduced my high interest rates and put me on the road to success. In the end, I saved thousands in interest, and today, my credit card debt is a thing of the past.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Neil. Take it from someone who's been there. Call Trinity and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
But he was like, "You're not ready for another baby."
I was afraid. I was scared. Everybody wanted me to have an abortion.
These are the voices that a young mom with an unplanned pregnancy hears. She wants to make the right choice, but society and those around her are telling her that a preborn baby is not a life. That's where Preborn Pregnancy Network steps in, providing love, support, and free ultrasounds, introducing moms to the beautiful life growing inside of them.
I'm going to keep my baby, and I'm going to be a great mom.
Preborn has rescued over 350,000 babies from abortion, and every day, their network of clinics rescues, on average, 200 babies. To learn more, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or visit preborn.com/AFR. That's preborn.com/AFR. All gifts are tax deductible.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. The Marines have been vandalized in Memphis, Tennessee. Someone posted an offensive message on a recruitment billboard the other day. The billboard featured a photo of a Marine with the question, "What do Marines fight for?" Well, somebody plastered another sign on the billboard with another message, the chance to feed Mexicans to alligators. Well, the message is a reference to the Immigration Detention Center in Florida named Alligator Alcatraz. The Marine Corps issued a statement saying the vandalism was unfortunate, but they're always ready to adapt and overcome. The problem is that some Memphians literally thought the Marines were hiring Americans to feed Mexicans to alligators. One man said he was especially disturbed because many Marines are of Mexican heritage. For the record, Marines are not feeding illegals to alligators in South Florida or anywhere else for that matter. But the rumor is some of those gators do have a fondness for salsa. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Well, the feds are doing a great job under ICE, and even though the left, of course, is hysterical about that, and of course, Superman Dean Cain getting involved, which is absolutely great. We're hoping to get him on the program hopefully next week, so stay tuned for that. But this headline, the feds dismantle Indian gang engaged in sex and drug trafficking. So federal authorities in Nebraska conducted raids leading to the arrest of 5 Indian nationals accused of operating a large-scale trafficking scheme involving sex, labor, and drugs. So the U.S. Attorney for Nebraska, ICE, FBI, and other law enforcement agencies coordinated with the multiple arrests, and they occurred in Nebraska across 14 business locations, 2 homes, and also had connections to operations in Georgia and Texas. U.S. Attorney Leslie Woods is quoted as saying, "There is no evil greater than the evil that seeks to trap, oppress, and exploit human beings for profit or pleasure." So the investigation uncovered forced labor trafficking, rescued 27 victims, including minors. So let's welcome in Beau French, who's the chairman of the Tarrant County GOP in the great state of Texas. And Beau, I think this is just, racking up win after win for law and order as we're talking about the federalizing Washington, D.C. And I think we're seeing the Trump administration overall doing a really good job at cracking down on a lot of this.
Well, good morning, Jenna, and it's a pleasure to be here. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Americans, during after the George Floyd riots and all of that, summer of love in 2020, and then we rolled right into the Biden administration where we just saw the dismantling of law and order around the country with, district attorneys just releasing criminals back on the streets, multiple-time felons just, walking in and out of the courthouse, on day one and just back on the streets and repeating crimes. And Americans are just fed up with that. So it's about time that, and thank goodness for Donald Trump, is getting the country pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, and so, what possibly can the left say to this? Because, of course, they're all, they're all up in arms and hand-wringing and, clutching their pearls and all of this about specifically ICE especially. But I don't think that that's really landing or resonating with Americans. I mean, even people who have immigrated to this country, who've come here legally, are saying we're for legal immigration, and we're for law and order. We've come to this country because of the American dream. I mean, I don't see that landing with any actual voters.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, you look at the complaints against ICE, and it's like people are complaining that federal law enforcement officers are following the laws. I mean, it's really shocking. I mean, you couple the 20 million illegal aliens that came into the country under Joe Biden. Crime is worse. You can't even go to an emergency room without having to wait 8 hours because there's so many illegal aliens in there getting health care. And or try go shopping at Home Depot or your average grocery store. I mean, the illegal aliens are everywhere. Crime is up despite the lies that these Democrat cities have tried to say that crime is down, and we know that they're cooking the books and not reporting everything to the FBI. I mean, we've uncovered that in several places. And so the average American, the average person just has a sense that, no, it is time to, remove illegal aliens. That's part of the job. That's the job of ICE. It's time to crack down on criminals, these roving band of thugs. And let's restore America. That's part of making America great again, is getting our country back to a position where people are safe walking around their streets, safe just walking in the city at night without fear of just it's almost impossible to do that now because there's just so many criminals on the streets.
Yeah, and Congress, Beau French, is starting to actually help with this. I mean, ICE's budget has expanded now under the One Big Beautiful Bill from $8 billion to $28 billion, and generally conservatives, are wary of increased spending by the federal government. But this includes massive plans for recruitment for ICE, deportations. But that's the part that's drawing kind of a bipartisan, quote unquote, concern about oversight, agency expansion. But I see this as part of the overall Trump mandate.
Well, I think it just speaks volumes as to the mood of the country and how Americans feel. I mean, this week it was announced that ICE has had over 100,000 patriots apply to come join forces. They're giving them, I think, a $50,000 signing bonus when they do. So deportations are about to significantly ramp up, and this is exactly what Americans voted for. I was at the convention in Cleveland last summer when we were, holding up the signs, that said, mass deportations. I mean, so this is something that was part of Trump's campaign. This is something that people, voted for, and so, I think some people are disappointed that that it hasn't happened as much as the number of deportations hasn't significantly ramped up yet. But obviously it takes time to hire all the people to build the infrastructure. But I think by year 2 we're really going to hit our stride, and we'll see these deportation numbers at record levels.
Yeah, and you're there in Texas, which obviously is a border state. Governor Abbott has been very firmly supportive of President Trump's agenda, as have a lot of Republican governors and all of that. But Texas is one of the more critical states, obviously, with the midterms, also in the Electoral College coming up in 2028. What is the sentiment there overall among specifically Texas voters in terms of ICE, the border protection plans, and all of this that Trump is doing, while the mainstream media is trying to frame this as separation of families and the sob stories, and let's take this out of context to say that we need to feel sorry for the person who's been here for 20 years and now is getting deported overall. I mean, is any of the mainstream media narrative landing with voters there, or is Texas overall generally supportive?
Well, I mean, the majority of Texans are supportive. Of course, just like any state, we have our share of communists here as well. But look, you've got to remember, Texas has a 1,250-mile border with Mexico. The bulk of the illegal aliens that entered our country came through Texas. I mean, the vast majority of them did. I mean, we all remember the pictures on the news. There was that bridge and like a staging ground under there where thousands were coming through a day, and under the Biden administration, Border Patrol, just had to let them into the country. And so, I felt terrible for all of those officers during the time. But, all of those illegal aliens were coming through Texas, inundating our small towns. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to some of the sheriffs down in those border counties, where the population of the county might only be, 20 or 30,000 people. And they were getting thousands of illegal aliens through there every single day, because they wouldn't just come through and load up on a bus. I mean, some of them, you got to remember that. I mean, the bulk of them did just kind of walk across the border and turn themselves in to then be, taken by the Biden administration somewhere else in the country. But there are also thousands and thousands and thousands who would evade Border Patrol, even though they were just getting a free pass into the country, would still evade Border Patrol, try to sneak across property. They were stealing cars. They were getting picked up by people who were, going to drive them somewhere, and they would try to outrun the police. And so, it created the most dangerous situation. I have property down near the border and about 20 miles from the border, and I had people across my property every single day during the Biden administration. And I don't mean like one or two people. I mean 10 to 20 people we would see down there, sneaking across and going, to wherever they were trying to go to. And so just imagine how bad of a person you would have to be, like what kind of person, a criminal, terrorist, to not just be the person that walks across to turn yourself in immediately and get transported anywhere in the country, but to risk your life, traveling at night through very dangerous terrain, trying to sneak into the interior of the country. They talked about the known gotaways. Well, some of them were known, I'm assuming, because they saw them on, cameras or whatever. But we know for a fact that there were lots that came through that they had no idea were there. And so there's just no telling how many really bad criminal, potential terrorist people there are in our country right now. And it frankly scares me. So we need to crack down. We need to get as many of these people out of our country as we possibly can over the next, 3.5 years of Donald Trump's term.
Yeah, well said. Well, Beau French, we're going to take a break right here, but he's going to stick with the program to talk about another important issue coming out of Texas. And I think that you're absolutely right that, we need to see this continue and law and order to protect our nation's sovereignty. It just makes sense. It's the rational position, and hopefully more and more people around the country will see that through the wins of the Trump administration and not buy into the ridiculous mainstream media headlines. So we will be right back with more with Beau French, who's the chairman of the Tarrant County GOP in Texas, right after this.
When God allows something difficult in your life, you could look at it as his gift to you. Here's Nancy DeMoss-Wolgemuth.
If our way is perverse before God, what a mercy it is when God sets out to oppose us in that way.
God's way of getting your attention on the next Revive Our Hearts with Nancy DeMoss-Wolgemuth.
Exploring Missions with Pastors Bert and Nathan Harper.
When I became a Christian believer, I felt that God was calling me to go to North India as a witness.
We focus on the most vulnerable in the Metro Atlanta area.
Operation Care International is started in Dallas, and now we have partnered with 52 countries.
Exploring Missions explores missions. Find it on the podcast page at afr.net.
A step-parent's job is never easy, and unfortunately, it only gets harder when your stepchild hits adolescence. Hi, I'm Mark Gregston with Parenting Today's Teens. No matter how much loving care you give, all too often step-parents experience rejection and anger from their stepchild. A step-parent becomes the target of the teen's regret. It might come from her sense of loss. She might even believe incorrectly that her life would be much happier and problem-free if you'd never come along. So if tensions are high right now between you and your step-teen, take heart. Though you can't force her to stop thinking the way she does, her feelings of loss won't go on forever. And one day, she'll understand the other side and see you as her solution, not her problem.
Looking for more parenting wisdom? Go online to parentingtodaysteens.org or search for Parenting Today's Teens in your favorite app store.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you are a pastor's wife, come be encouraged and renewed as you share your challenges and stresses unique to pastors and their wives.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat is coming October 28th through the 30th. You're invited to join us at Pickwick Landing State Park in Counce, Tennessee for 3 days of encouragement, renewal, and worship. Once again, Brother Bert Harper, AFA Director of Family and Pastoral Ministries, will host the retreat along with his wife Jan. Our special speaker will be J.J. Jasper of American Family Radio. If you've attended in the past, we'd love to see you again. And if you've never experienced a fishbowl retreat, we especially invite you to be refreshed and renewed. The per-couple admission price includes lodging, meals, and materials. Visit repairingthefoundations.net to learn more and register. That's repairingthefoundations.net.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. We'd love to see you there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, we're going to the Holy Land on a tour in March of 2026. We can't wait to go back. My wife Allison and I have been leading these tours for over 2 decades, nearly 3 decades. And we're going in March of 2026 to Israel. See all the places that you've read about since you were a child in the Bible. Bethlehem, Jerusalem, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, all of it. We'll be going there. And also my sons Walker and Wesley Wildman will be going to Greece on a Footsteps of Paul tour. You can do either the Holy Land trip or the Footsteps of Paul Greece tour, or both. For all the information on these tours, go to wildmangroup.com, WILDMON group.com, to get all the information on the 2026 March Israel and Greece tours.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and I am still here with my special guest, Beau French, chairman of the Tarrant County GOP from the great state of Texas. And this whole saga over redistricting Texas and the derelict Democrats walking out and leaving the state to Illinois and California and elsewhere, they actually came back, and yet Governor Abbott and Attorney General Paxton have asked the Texas Supreme Court to find that the Democrat lawmakers abandoned their seats when they left Texas to delay that new congressional map. And now, according to the Texas Tribune, the headline here is Texas Supreme Court won't rule for weeks on the GOP request to expel the Democrats who left the state. And so on Monday, the court rebuked the proposed timeline to that Governor Abbott wanted to do this quickly, asking the high court to rule just 48 hours after he filed. They set a 3-week period of briefings from both sides. The schedule, which the court noted is still expedited, anticipates final responses to be filed on September 4th, more than 2 weeks after the current special session is set to end. So, Beau, this seems like it's kind of an anticipated result from the Supreme Court that they're not going to just hurry and do this in the middle of special session. There would be appeals and delays anyway. But what do you make of this, and Abbott still touting this as a win?
Yeah, so I have a couple of opinions on this. I've been very outspoken on my X account about it. First of all, remember, Abbott comes from the world of being a judge. And so I think he is, very particular about wanting to go through what he, in his mind, is the appropriate process. I would have probably done it a little differently, much more aggressively. I would have just vacated their seats. And I think a lot of Texans that I hear from are saying the same, like, why didn't we just vacate their seats? They've done this before. They did it in 2021. And nothing happened to them in 2021, and that was because, of course, we had, a very rhino speaker at the time, Dade Phelan, who was elected speaker because he courted all of the Democrats. This time around, we have a very similar speaker named Dustin Burrows, who, again, courted support from all of the Democrats to win his speakership. He was not elected out of the Republican caucus. And so I think that, more Texans are awake now and recognize what's going on than they were in 2021. The pressure has ramped up incredibly. And I would say, to Governor Abbott's credit, he has moved to the right. Now, how far right is he going to go? I don't know. But he has certainly moved to the right since 2021 pretty significantly. He is definitely out there speaking way more about this. I think that what we're going to see is the Democrats will return. They'll be present in the legislature for the quorum. And then what I think is going to happen, and my understanding through my back channels, is this really is driven by Governor Abbott and not by the Speaker of the House. They're just going to lock the doors, and then Abbott is going to add to the call. They're messaging right now that it's just going to be the same priority legislation that was on the call for this special session that we're currently in, and my understanding is that there is talk of Abbott adding to the call and increasing the map, the redrawn congressional map, from adding 5 Republican seats to as many as 9, which would reduce the congressional map in Texas to only 3 Democrats. So we have 38 total seats. There would only be 3 Democrat seats left if we went all the way to plus 9, which would be, amazing for Texas. Other blue states have done this across the country. When Democrats are in power, they do everything they can to reduce the impact of Republicans. I think as Republicans, we need to be doing the same thing. We need to wield our power when we're in charge, reduce these maps. And while we're at it, I think Governor Abbott should redistrict the House districts in the Texas legislature and the Senate districts in the Texas legislature. We could also reduce the number of Democrats in those positions as well. And I think there is a growing voice among Texans to push the governor to do that. These Democrats need to be punished. Their seats need to be vacated. I don't think the court is going to do that. I have a feeling, and this is just my feeling, I'm not an attorney, but that we will get into this next special session. They will have had time to rule on a lot of these, or pass a lot of these bills. And my sense is the court is just going to say, well, at this point it's dilatory, and there's really no reason to do anything because they've already come back and legislated these issues. So I don't have a lot of confidence in the legal process. Because I think they tend to be, and rightly so, they tend to be very conservative on issues. But my opinion is we need bold leaders who are going to stand up and just say, no, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And the consequence is we're going to redistrict you out of existence. We're going to strip you of your seat. We're going to have a special election to fill it. And, you're not going to get any pay for the time you were gone. Democrats are no longer going to have any vice chairmanships in the Texas legislature. There's a whole list of things we could be doing immediately. And, the Texans are growingly frustrated and angry that hasn't happened yet. So we'll see how all this plays out.
And I'm speaking with Beau French, who's the chairman of the Tarrant County GOP there in Texas. And you raise a really good point that Governor Abbott, went basically seeking permission from the Texas Supreme Court to do what the state constitution authorizes him to do anyway. And so wouldn't it have been a better legal posture to set this up as I'm just going to exercise my authority that the state constitution and statutory legislation also gives me anyway, and then let them challenge it. And we're going to continue to just vacate the seats, have special elections, and see if the Democrats then can challenge that and prevail. But that might have been a stronger posture because then the Texas Supreme Court would have had to rule on the merits instead of maybe just, as you were just describing, Beau, just mooting this out, saying, well, they came back, they legislated, so obviously they're back in their position, so we're not going to essentially punish them for the time they were gone, rather than having to deal with the fact that they did vacate and they weren't there and they didn't show up. So why? You've mentioned Abbott is more deferential given his background. But, this is the kind of move I could see, Governor DeSantis here in my home state of Florida doing. Why isn't Abbott being quite as bold? Is it just because he has kind of that respect for the court wants to go through that process? Or is it maybe a little bit more of, hey, this looks good, it's a PR move, but it's not, anything that's genuinely risky?
Yeah, I can't really, speak to that. I've only spoken to the governor, just a couple of times in person. I don't know him personally, but my sense is that is just his nature. He comes from the legal background as a judge, and he is just more conservative and cautious in that regard. And you're right. I think I have a feeling someone like a Governor DeSantis wouldn't be asking for permission. He would just do it and then, ask for forgiveness if the courts ultimately deem that he was wrong. But, I think that, like I said, Texans are demanding that something happen. We voted overwhelmingly. Trump won by 14 points in Texas. He carried the state. It's a strong Republican state with Donald Trump on the ballot. And what we're trying to do is make the America First movement stick here in Texas and make it a strong America First, Republican state after, in a post-Trump world. So that's our focus here. But I think it's because we do respect the bold action of a President Trump. And so, there is a little bit of frustration here in Texas about the way this is carried out. But like I said, Governor Abbott, to his credit, has moved to the right. He really didn't do anything after the 2021 quorum break. The Speaker of the House didn't do anything. The Democrats were not punished. So, of course, like children, if you don't punish them, they do it again. And that's where we are right now. So, hopefully this will change. And I'll keep talking about it on my X account. And we'll see what happens.
Well, we'll keep covering it here as well because, this is an important issue in terms of Republicans, kind of fighting fire with fire. And it's been interesting to see that, Governor Newsom from California is kind of playing political games because, they've been redistricting and, doing all of this in California. And he's trying to please his base and, in my view, probably setting up a 2028 presidential run. And it feels like blatant voter disenfranchisement. And yet when, he's trying to call out Texas, it's totally different from Texas, where the map actually reflects the political makeup of the state instead of just, this attempt to silence the minority party. And so I think that it is a fair contrast to say, well, yes, Republicans should use their power, obviously, to push through conservative policies, to wield their power in the best interests, of frankly, their party's policies when they're in power. But I do think it's a different posture in Texas than it is California.
Well, remember, there's an old saying, everything Democrats accuse Republicans of are, in fact, the things that Democrats have been doing. So they're trying to accuse, red states, especially Texas right now, of, gerrymandering. And we're just following what they have already done. And then, as this public discourse, has borne out, they are now saying, well, it's not so much that you're doing what we've done. It's the timing. You're not doing it right after the census. You're doing it, 5 years after the census. Well, our argument to that is we now know that the census, counted tens of millions of illegal aliens around the country. So states like California, and this is another issue that thank goodness for President Trump. He's pushing on it right now. But states like California have millions of extra citizens, which means they have several extra representatives in Congress who are Democrats from California. So all of that needs to be fixed as well. And so Texas is just kind of leading in this regard. We're going to go ahead and, as a red state, we're going to go ahead and redistrict and pick up, between 5 and 9 new seats. If you want to see that map, I've posted it on my X account. But this is something that I think Republicans across the country are in favor of. I don't think any Republican is like, oh, no, we shouldn't do this. The blue states have already all done this. And so it is time that we do that, especially knowing that there was essentially a fraudulent census giving these blue states where they parked all these, tens of millions of illegal aliens, giving them extra Democrat seats. So I think if we can get all the red states to redistrict, we can pick up, 20 or 25 Republican seats in Congress. And if we can fix the illegal alien counted in the census issue, as President Trump has said, I think, Republican red states could pick up another, call it 20 seats. So we would get back to having, the 40 or 45 seat majority like we should under a map that elected Donald Trump the way that it did.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right in your description of the census, and the left is really frustrated that Trump has ordered a new census, and even though the Constitution says the census shall be every 10 years, there's no provision that prohibits a new census, especially if there's a flaw in the old one. And so it's going to be very interesting though to see what challenges, if any, kind of in the the midway point between the 2020 census and then the 2030 census is what's anticipated, and to see if some of those things are corrected, particularly before the 2028 presidential election, because, this obviously includes how the electoral maps are drawn, electors. I mean, it has a wide variety of impact on a lot of different things. So, I think it's a really interesting thing. When do we anticipate that to be concluded?
Well, I am not exactly sure on that timeline. I mean, if you look at previous census counts, they do them in the even numbered 10 years, and I usually, if I recall, that we kind of have the results of that the following year, and then that sets up for the redistricting by the states in their legislative sessions. So I think it's going to take a year, I'm sure, to get that completed and into effect.
Okay, and then but we'll still have a few years of at least the Trump administration being able to litigate it and maybe expediting that if it's ahead of 2028. And Trump can't run again, so this is going to be where he's saying, hey, this is not for me, it's for the future of the country. So really interesting. Beau French, thanks so much. You can follow him on X, and as always, you can reach me and my team Jenna at afr.net.